Welcome, everybody. I will just give people another few moments to join this meeting. Okay, I think we will start now. Thank you very much for joining us for UN 2.0 week. We will have a session at the moment on fostering global peace and new approaches in conflict resolution and diplomacy. My name is Cliona Raleigh, and I will be guiding this discussion today with some wonderful colleagues from the UN. I first wanted to update people as to what it was that we were speaking about when we talk about the UN Vision 2.0. It's about building the expertise and culture we need to better serve member states in the 21st century, of course, but perhaps a little bit more framing might be useful for everybody as we start. We will include during this session some interactive questions to contextualize what we're talking about. And I wanted to run over some key messages from the UN about UN 2.0. So in that light, it involves what's called a quintet of new skills, and they include a quintet to change. So halfway to 2030, the world is not on track to achieve the SDGs, unfortunately. To accelerate progress, everybody needs to rethink, refocus, and recharge. And with that, I would like to take a simple poll with everybody here today, and that will be whether or not you think that global conflict rates have increased or decreased in the past decade. So a poll should appear, and please go ahead and vote as to whether you think it has increased or decreased during that period. UN 2.0 is a vision of a modernized UN system with cutting-edge skills and forward-thinking culture that enable UN entities to better contribute to the quest for the SDGs. These ongoing internal transformations are designed around a quintet of change. For innovation, it's learning to scale up new solutions. So for example, given that we're all here to talk about peace and conflict, it's to help expand responses to conflict-affected populations. For data, it's building impactful data ecosystems, for example, to help raise common understandings of risks and threats. For the digital lens, it's becoming fluent in digital impact, for example, to help maintain standards of interoperability of information sectors and places. For Foresight, it's learning to navigate uncertainty. And of course, an example of this is learning to adapt to known and unknown risks in the places that we're working. For behavioral science, it's enabling better choices and uptake, for example, to help better understand political processes that create the likelihood for peace. So with this, I think, very good. Thank you very much for the poll, everybody. We're trying to yes, very good. Thank you very much. I'd just like to acknowledge that 90% of the people on the call believe that conflict has increased in the past decade. And that is, in fact, empirically correct. It has. And I really want to bring people's attention to the fact that if we believe that conflict has increased in a period where we have been avidly working to decrease violence and conflict, especially given the SDGs, and encourage peaceful negotiation and engagement, then we have to maybe change quite a number of the things or quite a number of ways that we engage in conflict-affected places in order to achieve the goals of the SDGs and beyond. So before I introduce our panelists, I want to actually just kind of guide you through some of the previous ways we've talked about and emphasize that UN 2.0 is designed to foster a dynamic, diverse, and curious organizational culture where these new skills, those 5 parts of the quintet previously mentioned, can thrive. So I'm going to actually then now ask a second question, which is to deal with the conflict environments in which you work, have you applied data, foresight, or innovations? So please feel free to engage with that question while I discuss something that might be in the back of your mind at the moment, which is, I want to first acknowledge how many of us may feel a distance from the terms that emphasize empirical approaches, data, and data science. UN 2.0 is designed to make the most of people's experience and insights. and produce ways of engaging so that we can all benefit from a collective and systematic approach for these very serious and changing problems of conflict. For this reason, today we will ask what you need to develop your skills on anticipatory action, data literacy, and information sharing, and how to feel confident in engaging with foresight and uncertainty. So it can be quite a heavy lift for people to kind of engage with these concepts and, of course, with these new practices and skills. And so we want to present to you ways in which your colleagues have done so, and also ask what you need in order to get there. So, as I mentioned, several of your colleagues have developed these skills and applied them. And what we can see is that it requires people to, of course, foster a culture of thinking of solutions that travel. So solutions in one context can be used and applied in another. It also requires thinking of what the direct and indirect risks to your work are and how these risks interact. So these are things that you're probably already thinking of, and it's just the application to a more systematic way of doing that. I always think it's very important to decide in your own context what is measurable and what is modelable. So what is an important context that we can apply these new skills? And some of these are philosophical problems and others are logistical, but UN 2.0, I think, is designed to help people learn the skills to make them more comfortable doing so. Let me showcase some of the important features of how the quintet of change can be extremely useful for you. Many speaking with us here today will feature the ways in which data and foresight have improved their ability to understand the problems they're tasked with dealing with and advocate for the right solutions. So I always think, when does data become evidence? It becomes evidence when you ask a question and you can understand the strength and direction of the answer. And when does it become significant is when you can apply that evidence to advocate for a particular change. But the caveat, pardon me, we have lost the presentation.
Actually, please go on.
Oh, thank you. I'm just trying to make sure that we can, there we go. The caveat to that is that we need a minimum level of shared knowledge to exchange in this way. And it can be helpful to think of these quintets or these changes in the quintet and, of course, data itself as a language you can learn and innovation as a habit you can develop for a range of proficiencies. So you can engage in this conversation about evidence, significant, and foresight. And with that, I would like to introduce your colleagues and our panelists today. We'll start with Rana Taha, who is a peace and development advisor in Kenya, serving in different UN positions with peace operations and headquarters. She is responsible for the design and management of various innovative development and peace-building interventions, as well as the provision of integrated guidance for UN programs on prevention. Using innovation and untraditional approaches for problem solving, Rana has focused on strengthening the links between credible analysis and impactful sustaining peace. Welcome. I would also like to introduce Einstein Rokuts, who is an information management specialist in the Information Management Unit in Colombia. Einstein is a computer science professional with an information management specialist, acting as the head of the IMU. Einstein supports decision-making based on monitoring, verification, and investigation performed by the UN, and engaging with national institutions, armed groups, former combatants, and communities. And last but not least, of course, is Martin Wallish, who's the head of the Innovation Cell at the UN Department of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs. Martin leads the Innovation Cell, an interdisciplinary team dedicated to exploring, piloting, and scaling new technologies, tools, practices in conflict prevention, mediation, and peace building. Before joining the Policy and Mediation Division at DPPA, he worked on peace processes in the Middle East and security dialogues. Welcome, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here today to chat with you. I'm going to first actually lead this discussion with Rana's perspective on the way in which she's been innovative in her role. Rana, please.
Thanks a lot for that, Kleena, and thank you, colleagues, for joining us today. I wanted to share really a little bit of my experience in using foresight in my work. Some of the details we will send you through links and other things after this webinar and during the webinar. So I'll leave some of the technical details off of this discussion. At the beginning of this year, the government of Kenya asked the UN for its help in looking at the peace-building architecture in the country and seeing how we can help them review the peace-building architecture with a view towards making it better and improving it for the future. The ultimate aim is really to look at setting a new agenda for peace for Kenya and ultimately finding out how can we get there. I'll spare you the details of how we went about it, but we definitely used multiple aspects of UN 2.0 from the use of data, innovation, etc. The focus today is on how we used Foresight. And what we did is we partnered with the UN Futures Lab and UNDP Foresight Lab to design a number of future workshops to help focus the process on the future and what Kenya can be looking at in the future, not only in the present or the past. And that was extremely helpful because it broke the discussion away from the current deadlocks of looking at the present and what locks people, what brings people apart rather than bringing them together. We thought the use of Foresight methodologies, which you will see through the various links that we shared, were extremely helpful in actually bringing inclusion, because you're no longer talking about issues that divide people. You're talking about most of the time futures that people want and futures that people don't want, and looking at alternative futures. So in that way, we thought that the use of Foresight was extremely helpful. I'll stop here in case you want to ask me any questions, Cleena.
Thank you very much, Rana. I really appreciate that. Can you please just go over what the guiding questions were for this project in particular, and how were those questions suitable for this project, and of course the new skills you applied suitable for this project?
Sure. I think the starting point was for us as UN, what was the impact? What was the best outcome that we want to see out of this intervention? How can we as UN support a process that is credible, inclusive, that is transparent? And what tools do we have at our disposal that can actually ensure that? So we decided to use Foresight as one of the tools. A second question is really, that was extremely important, is for us, how can we use the various partnerships around us to achieve this objective? Because definitely, and I want to assure everybody, I'm not a Foresight expert, I'm not a data scientist, and you don't need to be one. I think what you need to do is to really know enough about it and to know enough about the community around and to plug yourself into all of these communities. And now we have the UN Futures Lab, and you'll see some information on them. To ask yourself, how can I leverage all of these partnerships to bring together all of these aspects and pillars of UN 2.0 into the discussion?
Thank you very much, Rana. I will say, I think I participated in, of course, one of these exercises many years ago. And one of the most innovative parts of this was not to say, well, what do you think of the current situation on the ground in Kenya as it applies to the election, but what do you think it's going to look like in future years? And so to talk to colleagues, not about debating, let's say, the merits of the exact situation now, but of course, how you thought it would develop was incredibly innovative, without necessarily needing any data, just for your own mental processes for engagement. So I highly recommend being involved. And I want to just be clear about, did it create the impact you wished it would have?
Undoubtedly it did. And I think that one of the main issues that was important for us and objectives is to ensure that this is an inclusive process that brings together different voices. And that was very difficult at some points because the level of political polarization in the country varies and becomes very, very difficult to bring in opposition with government when tensions are extremely high. So when you're talking about foresight, alternative futures, talking about scenarios, visioning, it becomes a very, very different type of discussion, a discussion that most people that normally would not be in the room to sit around the table with other participants would actually come into the room out of curiosity, out of wanting to be part of this discussion, and knowing that this discussion is not really about agreeing right now about the current present and what the current issues that are tearing these people apart. So for us, it was extremely helpful and really detrimental in bringing all of the right people around the table.
Wonderful, thank you very much. I believe we will move on at the moment now to Martin. Martin, are you ready?
Yes.
Great, let me get onto your slides. There you go.
Well, thanks so much for having me, and then happy World Creativity and Innovation Day that we celebrated yesterday on the 21st of April. You know, I think the UN has come a long way. We're celebrating World Innovation Day since 2018, and the UN is soon celebrating 80 years. And I feel since the pandemic in particular, a lot of good work has been done to mainstream innovation and not just make it a thing or something nice to have, but really something need to have to bring this organization forward. I wanted to start with sketching out kind of the plethora of activities that we have been up to in the Department of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, a range of issues concerning conflict prevention. How do we strengthen political analysis through better data gathering and data analytics, but also on the creative storytelling side. And let me zoom in on one issue in particular, which is digital dialogue. So if you go to the next slide, I just wanted to briefly sketch out why it is so important to use technologies in peace processes. And one part is that it's very hard to really be inclusive. When you think about kind of the common way of how consultations are happening, they're usually happening in a very exclusive setting, that you have a handful of people being part of focus groups. And if you're lucky, we conduct large-scale surveys to think about kind of what the population at scale believes. And in some cases, you have national dialogue forums that have grown in its size over the last years, but it's very hard to be fully inclusive. So here, this is where technology comes in. And again, I think the pandemic has been helpful just with the fact that the system, and I think probably humanity as well, has become more comfortable with employing technology. So it's less foreign to have a video conference like today, while think about it, like 6 years ago, having a telco would require some logistical finesse. And what we have been doing in the last years was to basically use the power of artificial intelligence to make voices heard at scale. So it gives you the scale of a poll, but also the intimacy, the flexibility of in a focus group where you listen to the answer of others and you can respond to that. We teamed up with a private sector partner in that regard, and we really see this as kind of element of a large scale of tools and applications that define digital dialogues in all forms and shapes. If you go to the next one, let me just say a bit about kind of how this works. This is an anonymous conversation, so you wouldn't really see the face or hear the voice as you have it here on a Zoom call of the participants. So it gives a lot of anonymity to those who participate. We see some anonymity already here in the chat where people ask questions and self-identified with your name. But we often see that people become more honest when they have a little bit of distance to being seen. And those kind of text-based conversations also allow us to operate in places where the internet bandwidth wouldn't really allow for audiovisual communication, where you need to have a certain bandwidth to have kind of a rocky-free digital dialogue as such. Now, when you think about the opportunities, I think we need to be equally cognizant of challenges. The truth is that internet connectivity is something that concerns the world and hasn't really been, reaching all pockets of the world, and having access to them is a luxury. And when you think about conflict zones in particular, you probably think twice whether you should participate in a digital dialogue with the United Nations or rather send, a text message to your loved ones or pictures to show how your life is like. But what we've seen is that there is a lot of enthusiasm, eagerness to try out new means, new ways, and that the UN has, especially us in the Department of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, has really tried to cater to those kind of new circumstances. Now, a few concluding remarks. I feel artificial intelligence is not just the talk of the day, but also the future. And I can really imagine new forms where large language models can, supercharge those kind of conversations where we, not just 1,000, but like thousands of people can participate at the same time, and new technology can really help to have self-deliberations. And that is really important, I think, at a time where the world seems to be out of whack, and when we need to use and try out everything we can to bring it back to some kind of order. Back to you. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Martin. I really appreciate that. I watched a video of your discussion about these AI-assisted dialogues today, and it was excellent. So I highly recommend people to take that in if they can. Can you tell us how the AI-assisted dialogue suggested distinct, new, and different directions from those that would be gleaned from more traditional approaches?
Very good. Yeah. So basically, I think, and that goes for any kind of probing, which could happen to in-person meetings or meeting experts or having a town hall, right? First point is always, certainty, right? And Rana just talked about the future, right? Are we clear about the priorities that we think are the priorities, right? So that means, are there any blind spots that we haven't discovered? And those kind of dialogues have pointed out blind spots to us that were not, obvious, or they have kind of, and that's the second point, kind of re-emphasize that certain priorities need to be taken, right? Things where, maybe the gut feeling or a certain political narrative points into a direction, but here, with the evidence and data at hand, it creates this greater certainty on very difficult issues where certain kind of personal or larger political narratives tend to take over.
Thank you very much for that. And how have the conclusions, or rather the aggregated kind of sense of how people are feeling, been integrated into your discussions around either peace negotiations or elite dialogues in these unstable places that you've been working?
So in the best case, high representatives of the Secretary General, envoy, special representative would pick that up and bring this to the attention of the Security Council. We've seen this in the case of Libya, Yemen, Lebanon, and a few other places where this has become part of briefings to the Council and to the international community. And in other cases, making those results public has created a counterpoint to formal negotiations where those voices are usually not heard, right? And that gives an opportunity to bring those larger public concerns to the attention of key decision makers. Now, I think one point here is critical, and that is that those digital conversations don't just become gimmicky or kind of a performance, right? It's very important to close that loop and then encourage that those sometimes unwanted voices are actually considered in political conversations.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. We'll be following up on some of the points about how you can adopt these same procedures in your own work after Einstein. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, Fiona. I'm going to share my screen, please.
I have your slides here if that makes it easier for you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much.
No worries.
Okay. So, I'm going to talk about the importance of data in fostering peace from the vision of the verification mission in Colombia. So through an example, but I would like to give you a brief description of what we do here. With our mandate is based on the peace agreement between the government of Colombia and the FARC, which was the biggest and oldest guerrilla in America. So it is our core mandate. And also, we are verifying to ceasefires at this moment with 2 guerrillas. For us, verification is the core of our work. This is a verification mission. So it means that data quality needs to be immersed in that. No, for us, data quality means credibility. I would like to highlight that the reporting workflow that we have here, we have more than 600 people working with the mission and more than 400 working in the field, in the deep field also. So the reporting system works, starts from the very deep field, goes the information and the reports to the regional offices, then goes to the HQ here in Bogota, and then we need to report every 3 months to the Security Council in New York. As I am the chief of the Information Management Unit, I would like to say that we are supporting all the areas of the mandate. So next, please. Yeah, so the example is about how how we created the mandate on restorative sentences. The restorative sentences are those sentences that will be issued by the tribunal, by the Special Jurisdiction for Peace, that is a tribunal of transitional justice created under the peace agreement. And the idea is that these restorative sentences put the victims in the center of the peace agreement. So the idea with the restorative sentences is that the people under the jurisdiction is going to receive the sentence and needs to repair victims and communities during a maximum of 8 years. So next, please. So there was a request for this mandate from the government of Colombia, together with FARC, with the former combatants. And the idea was once the Security Council received the request, so they decided to perform a strong analysis in terms of the substantive panorama and operational possibilities and viability of the new mandate. So next, please. So what happened with that was that here we created 2 teams. One team was in charge of the substantive analysis. And also when we saw the dimension of the challenge, so we realized absolutely that we needed a lot of judicial information from the tribunal. So it was required to work together with the tribunal as a team. In that sense, we involved the attorney's office, the different parts of the jurisdiction. Here, the executive secretariat and also the investigations and the analysis team. When we started putting all the information together, we saw that we had a lot of information. So we need to generate some categories of information, create some variables, trying to understand where the victims are located, where the perpetrators are located, where the reparatory activities were taking place, and also the institutional offer. So we put also the qualitative and quantitative data together, and the idea is that we had to do a strong transformation of judicial data. We created KPIs by municipality and also use the power of GIS to do all the statistics in that area. In terms of the results, obviously, was an indicator per municipality to declare the intensity of possibility to have restorative sentences there. Also in the operational level, we have to cross references with the deployment that we had in the field, and so the possibility to extend to some different areas where it is expected or was expected to have restorative sentences. Next, please. So at the end, this analysis, what was used by the Security Council, they consider, and also our colleagues here, all that inputs as a valuable and robust input to produce the final document that was sent to the Security Council through the Secretary General, and the resolution approved the mandate in 2021. Next, please. And with the force of the exercise, we, as we work together with the tribunal, we saw that they could use that model to solve different questions and more questions. So substantive and judicial questions. So the mission delivered the model to the jurisdiction, and the idea is that today this model is considered as an official tool for the jurisdiction. So here I have it is in Spanish, but is the document that formalizes the geostatistical model as a tool to take decisions, judicial and administrative decisions. So that's the example. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Einstein. That's incredibly impressive. As a data collector myself, I know that your work is very, very highly regarded. So many of the projects that we've learned about here managed to take an inclusive approach to how we would get to a position where people can agree and then, of course, move on to negotiate or to establish more peaceful conditions. And I'm curious, Einstein, in your case, did all the actors take to this process in a positive way? In many ways, of course, detailing threats and risks and also violence by actors can lead to some accusations of bias or just some who are less likely to participate. How did that go?
Yeah. So first of all, I need to say that the work with the tribunal was amazing. They were completely open to work together with us. The political aspects were taken into consideration because we are not a judicial mission. We are a political mission. So it was important always to maintain independence during the process, in the entire analysis and also with the results. Something that happens here is that obviously, as the victims are in the center, but the information is moving every day, and every second, for instance, the advances of the cases are moving really fast. So what we did was to take the current picture at that time, and work with that. And obviously it is moving and the mission is adapting to the changes, to be obviously updated and to respond properly.
Thank you very much. And with that, I think we're going to move on to a discussion around understanding critical enablers. And what we mean by that is taking a deeper dive into how the UN system or components of the UN can help you adopt some of these parts of the quintet of change. And so, as you have noticed from the examples we've spoken about here, they occurred on different scales, whether it's the project or, of course, at the center or at the country scale. And I'm wondering, what are the structural enablers or support from the HQ that have allowed you to enhance these innovations? And I think I'll start with Martin, and I'll ask, did you come to these different violent contexts that you wanted to encourage the AI dialogue, or were you invited? How did that work?
Thanks so much. I mean, look, how do we make innovation happen in a big bureaucracy that is soon celebrating 80 years? And the answer is through bureaucracy, right? Beat bureaucracy with bureaucracy. So the fact that we have strategies in place, starting with the strategy of the Secretary General, new technologies, then followed with the data strategy, followed then with a common agenda, which entails also the quintet of change. This has been enormously helpful, not just to form an innovation community, which has existed before those policies, but to give permission for experimentation, give permission for trying out new things. So I think that has been very important. And it takes time. I mean, again, 80 years soon to be celebrated, probably another 80 years, to really roll out innovation, all pockets of the United Nations. And you have some enthusiasts here, but and many enthusiasts that joined that conversation, but also many skeptics, rightfully so. Is this just something that looks good but doesn't really work? and things that are important in that context. Now, when it comes to the mandate, we never act without an invitation, especially from headquarters. So things can be motivated. We can inspire from HQ, and Einstein and Rana I know very well, and I've been in the field myself, where in the field you often don't have this eagle-eyed perspective, right? Where you don't really know, so what's happening in Colombia when you sit in Kenya, right? Or when you sit in Colombia, what's happening in Kenya, so the other way around. And that's where we have tried to create an innovation community through dedicated training programs, innovation labs that we run on a regular basis. A big shout out to Johanna from the UN Innovation Network here, which is a superb kind of infrastructure for all staff members in the UN innovation system to get ideas. So if you haven't gone to the UN Innovation Network website, please do so, because a lot of the lessons learned are shared there, right? And that kind of goes then to inspiring the field, getting inspired, and then obviously getting requests, generating a mandate in a very bureaucratic manner. We're a startup to a certain extent, I feel, but there are still procedures in place to make change happen in the United Nations.
Wonderful, thank you very much. And yes, it is to be celebrated, 80 years doing this work. So on now to Rana and Einstein. What are the critical conditions in terms of the mindset and the organizational perspectives for UN colleagues in the field to embrace some of these approaches? And how can we help them understand how to embrace these initiatives rather than seeing them as an exercise that must be done? Rana, would you like to start?
Sure. Thank you so much, Lina. I think the beginning is always the individual, right? The staff member. And from my personal experience, I think it starts with the excitement of wanting to make a difference and linking the work that I do as a person to the bigger objectives of the organization, and asking oneself the big question of, what is it that I'm going to do during the next 2 years or 3 years of my deployment in this place that's going to make people's life better? If I'm working in peace and security, where is this entry point? And start looking for it and start creating opportunities for it. And what's important also as part of the critical conditions is when having the excitement, you have to identify the correct entry point. And the third thing is you have to also create the alliances around it to support it, to make sure that you have enough, you've generated enough excitement and support around your idea that there will be a lot of other people carrying it forward. So partnerships is always a great thing to remember, because as UN, and I deliberately started my intervention by making it very, very simple and not talking about the methodologies, because I don't want the colleagues to be scared and think this is very difficult. We will send you the links, you can look at them, some of it you can research, etc. It's not about that. It's about having the desire to make a difference, finding the correct entry points, finding the correct networks, and leveraging the partnerships to make a difference. And accepting, finally, this is my final point, accepting that we will make mistakes along the way, and that it's okay to make mistakes, to have management and organization that allows the staff members to actually run with little pet projects that would make a difference. Thank you.
That's wonderful, Rana. Thank you. And to complement that, I will just say that I think people are often really excited to engage with people who have a little project that they want to see if they can make it work. So there's a lot of good energy around a new project for that. Einstein, would you like to mention any things about people in the field and how they can adapt and adopt to some of these changes?
Yeah, for sure. Completely agree with Rana. The partnerships are essential. Maybe I can give you an example or some examples that the implementation of the peace agreement here created some tripartite spaces and mechanism. And the idea is that in that spaces and instances, you have both parties, you have the government and you have the former combatants working together, and also with the UN and the confidence, the trust of the UN here is so big. So the idea is that we work together, and the idea is to face problems together. Obviously, information has or every stakeholder has its own version of the information, but once you put them together, then you can see the intersection, what is in common, and also face the problems directly with the parties. Also, in the case of the ceasefires, is the same thing. Currently, we have 2 ceasefires, and also there is the participation of the government of Colombia, the armed group, and also the UN in the middle, or contributing also. So I think this is a good practice to bear in mind. And maybe internally, I would like to highlight the commitment of the senior leadership in this change, and the importance to raise the importance of the information and data management into the process.
Wonderful, thanks very much. I would also one of the things I've noticed about especially your project, Einstein, is the level of complementarity your different colleagues must have. So not everybody needs to be a GIS expert, but rather there needs to be some in order for others to be able to benefit from their skills, and from the GIS expert to also benefit from the insights of the other skills together. I think that there's sometimes a fearful sense that you have to gain a lot of data or empirical skills to engage, but really what you need to do is be willing to be open-minded about the approaches and how different they need to be.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because maybe I can say that at the beginning, maybe some years ago, I was thinking that if you are a data guru, then you solve the problems of the other people. But now it's different. Now is how we connect different perspectives, different ideas, different points of view together. So I would like to say that internally in the mission, we have created core teams together with the substantive pillars, the FTS, GIS, and the information management unit, everybody working in the same page and trying to solve problems together, and to maybe to create methodologies, processes, tools, whatever is necessary, but together. And at the end, you see that the engagement of everybody is really, really better, and is different completely.
Wonderful, thank you very much. Martin, would you like to mention anything here?
So I was answering some of the questions in the chat in parallel, and the one that I was just about to answer was about scale. So let me do this now verbally, human to human, so to say. There was a question in the chat about how do we evaluate our work? How do we measure impact? How do we scale at the same time, right? So that doesn't just work in certain places, but can really transform an organization. And here I think important part of all of this is storytelling. We are telling you our stories about how things work, right? So then we can, from that, distill certain methodologies. As Rana said, we should always look at the use case first and not come with the tool. I think we are driven by this obsession that, everybody wants a chatbot now, as everybody wanted to have a dashboard in the past, but think about the technology second before we identify really what the problem is, and then think about kind of realistically how technology can really be suitable in a certain context, and often it's just complementary, right? It's just like at the sideline, it's not the thing. It's not going to solve a problem that is made by humans, but it can advance, the way of how we carry out diplomatic engagement. That's what I was thinking about while I tried to answer some of the many good questions in the chat, and thanks for the questions from the audience.
Yes, they're excellent. Thank you very much. I'm going to now ask some of these excellent questions for the panelists. I'm going to start with Sicarius. Sicarius, would you like to ask your question? Would you like me to? I don't know if they can actually.
They can clean up. I need a little bit of warning for that. So is that Sicarius Eriksson?
Yes.
Okay, Sicarius, if you're there, do you want to take the floor?
Hear me?
Excellent, thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm the innovation specialist in the regional office of UNFPA in West and Central Africa, just to introduce myself. My question was really about when we talk about innovation and new approaches to doing things. it can be, often is, difficult to get stakeholders on board, especially in our line of work within the UN, and I would imagine also within peacebuilding and conflict resolution. So that was the question: how do you get stakeholders on board to try new things in that context? Thank you so much.
Rana, would you like to take this question about stakeholders and getting them on board, because that was an
Sure.
important component of your work?
Sure. I think that the first principle in getting anyone on board is always really creating the appetite for it and not giving ready-made solutions. As UN, we often make the mistakes of just giving the solution. And I think what we really need to be better at is creating these solutions with the stakeholders themselves and offering them different tools so that they're aware of what is the menu out there. And I think this is in the context of the Kenyan peacebuilding architecture. We offered a menu of so many different things that different participants were able to engage in. Some were related to social media, some related to more data analytics, some related to interviews, some related. So we really gave a huge menu of different options and different solutions, and allowed the different stakeholders to engage with what they are comfortable with. And I think that the second aspect of it is also understanding, which you know better than I do, that it's a gradual journey of appreciation of all of these technologies and all of these innovative approaches, whether it's foresight, whether it's data, and allowing the space for, as I said before, for failure, and accepting that some people will not like it. And that is completely okay, because if we're talking about national ownership and national empowerment, we really need to be true to it and offer people the menu. If they don't want it, maybe we can offer different approaches as well. So it's a very humbling experience for us as UN.
Thank you very much, Rana. That's really helpful. Einstein, would you like to offer any insights into that also, or should we move to Katarina Antonevich?
No, but maybe I just want to say that in the information management unit here, we had people from like data geeks at the beginning, but now we incorporated lawyers, people from political sciences, I don't know, international observers, etc., etc. So it absolutely provides a different perspective of the services that we can deliver. No? It's just that.
Thank you, Einstein. That's actually really important. And it goes to the next question. Is Katarina available, or should I read the question?
She's here, Katarina Antonevich. Let's give you the floor.
Hello.
Katarina, hi, can you hear us?
Hear me? Very good. Yeah. Sorry. Good day. Thank you so much for the presentation. I have a question actually for Martin. How you mentioned that you use slow internet and that sometimes it's good for the speakers to stay anonymous, but how do you actually navigate the credibility of information? We are speaking about conflict zones, right? And sometimes it's very important to know who is speaking and who is doing the claim. And it goes back not only to conflict zones actually, but also just to credibility information. I worked in FAO with digital agriculture, and I know that farmers, for example, are very skeptical and have a big trust issue to any information which is shared with them, especially through digital means. So how do we have this gentle balance of getting everyone on board, giving them the floor, but also having the credibility of information? Thanks, over.
Thanks so much, Katarina. I have to admit that I don't have all the answers to that. As you said, it's a delicate dance. It depends on really the situations. And I hear you loud and clear that we often face moments where individuals want to submit testimonials, right? They want to be on record. They want to be seen. They want to be kind of ambassadors for what their communities think. And for that, we have other outlets. Twitter, other social media channels are pretty kind of open. You can stand there with your face, with your voice. Your story can open your house, and people do this very actively. So there's less of a need for us to create a platform, but rather to kind of follow those signals, understand what is said on different platforms. So we turn to the mentioned AI-enabled dialogues because that was something that wasn't present yet. And let me say here that the important part, and it goes to the issue of misinformation as well. The important part is not to just believe in one signal, right? Not just believe what you read in the mainstream media or what you see on Twitter or Instagram or TikTok and believe that's the truth, right? But what we try in political analysis is to create a multiplicity of signals, right? To come closer to the truth. And there was a question in the chat also similar to yours on, what do we do with the outliers in those dialogues? And the beauty of statistics is that those kind of individuals, if they are singular, right, get easily exposed because they're often indeed just singular voices. And the larger we structure conversations, the more we make sure that we understand what the majority thinks. Now, goes back to another point, but that's something for another conversation of how we do make sure that we don't forget about the minorities in those conversations, because paying attention to those outliers is equally important as paying attention to majorities, right? Because they might be spoilers or they have the power to mobilize if needed. So sensitivity for those issues, multiplication of signals, that's I think how we manage what you call this kind of delicate dance, this delicate balance. Hope that's helpful.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Would anybody else like to respond to similar questions around integrating different voices? Great. Joanna, would you like to suggest any other questions?
Absolutely, thank you. I would like to try and go to Markus Krebs. Markus, if you're there, you are now able to come in and ask your question.
Thank you very much. I did ask a couple of questions. I don't know which one you specifically referring to, but I guess I'll start with the first one, which is for Martin. My question was, usually when you look at different scenarios and undertake scenario analysis, particularly if you've got peer-reviewed data, either from the same nation or maybe the region available, you can sort of do some back testing and see whether your hypothesis actually applies or not. Do you do that kind of stuff? And do you end up with a sort of a base case, a worst case, a best case scenario, and then try to model the strategic and diplomatic responses around the predicted outcomes? Thank you.
Yeah, wonderful. I think it goes actually to Rana on Foresight, right? Because like a simple way of forecasting would be best case, worst case, medium case scenario, but getting more comfortable with the kind of the many shades of the many colors, of how things go. That's what we are after. And indeed, I mean, like, in the best case, we look at regional sentiment studies. We look at, the many surveys that are carried out, think about youth engagement barometers, regional barometers to make sense of what are spillover effects, because something that, is of concern for one place might be probably also of concern for the other region, and vice versa, right? If you don't have data on a certain place, or it's curated in a way, as you phrase it, right, to drive a certain narrative. Think about unemployment rates, right? How member states like to report their unemployment rates because they drive a certain political narrative. But maybe Rana wants to come in, because indeed what she has been trying to do is to go beyond best case, worst case, medium case scenario.
Yeah, I think that it's important to remember that there's so many different alternative futures, and to bring in besides the X and Y of a best case scenario and a worst case scenario, and the for futures axis, I think it's really important to look at different alternative futures, and with that you widen the conversation a little bit further, so you can zoom into the best case scenario or a desired scenario and take the discussion into a place that's not as simplistic as a best case scenario, which is idealist and and almost never happens, but look at different alternative futures where there's a mix of different realities that actually grow from the current trends. So you're basically marrying the trend analysis that you have, the data tendencies that you're seeing, and some of them are going in one direction and others are going in the opposite direction. And looking at all of these alternative futures is really important to paint a more sophisticated reality, more sophisticated discussion to help the stakeholders and the different people participating understand the different shades and the different possibilities. I hope this helps somehow.
I think it certainly does. Thank you very much. I'm just going to wrap up at the moment by saying that what I've heard here today is that the UN senior leadership is, of course, very supportive and is trying to drive these changes through these components of the quintet of innovation, data, digital foresight, and behavioral science adoption. But more than anything else, I think that there's a focus on the curiosity of new approaches. And of course, as Rana very helpfully pointed out, you don't have to succeed every time. A lot of this is an iterative process where you try something and you figure out what works, and then you try it again with a little bit more success than the first time. And that's how all innovations are born, you know? So it is also very clear that there is quite a lot of support to learn this language and practice of engaging in this way, you know, with new policies and new practices to make sure that we can counter the rising conflict that we've all suggested is occurring with new ways that where we can feel a bit more empowered and empower the communities that we're serving. And I think I'll leave it there. Thank you very much to all the panelists and of course the audience. It's been a pleasure to assist in this webinar, and I wish UN 2.0 the very best. Any final comments from anybody? Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.